Okay, let's try and map the MIDI output of our Max for Live PoseNet device and see what kind of results we get and see what calibration and fine tuning might be nice. So we can see I'm moving my nose in the x axis, and I'm getting those changing values. And before we even try and calibrate it, let's just connect it up to a parameter. So to do that, we're first going to need to set the MIDI output of our track to the IAC driver. And then this process is very finicky, and we need to make sure we follow it correctly. Now that that is outputting to the IAC driver, you want to make sure also that in your preferences, the output for the IAC driver is set to track is on and remote is on as well. If remote is off, this probably won't work. So make sure they're both on for the output of the IAC driver. Then, once you're sure that you're receiving messages, you want to select the parameter that you want to map first. So I'm going to do the reverb or the first send of this audio track. So I've selected it. Then I'm going to press Command M. And you can see that that quickly maps the output from this Max for Live device, because it's constantly sending MIDI messages to the parameter that I selected there. And then if I get out of MIDI mapping mode and then move my head back and forth, you can see that I am indeed have my nose mapped to that reverb device. So the thing is, you can see we're getting a lot of overlap and it's spinning a long way. And what we need to do now is scale our input from PoseNet to something that's appropriate for a MIDI parameter. So the first thing you want to do is kind of have a look and see what is the range of my movement for this particular parameter. So if I go all the way to my left, you can see the values down here basically go down to 0. And if I close these controls and go all the way to the right, there's a little bit of an overrun, but you see it basically goes up to 600. So what we want to do, or what that says to me, is that I want to scale the values from 0 to 600 down to the MIDI values of 0 to 127. So I'll open my patch, get out of presentation mode. Here is the CC number, but what we want to look at is the CC value. That's the thing we want to scale. So if I move that up a little bit, so in between here, I want to add a scale object. So if I click on the patch cable and then press Shift N, I can insert an object in between those two connected ones. Type in scale. Now we just checked, and the values that we're getting from PoseNet were 0 to 600 for this parameter, and we want it to be scaled down to 0 to 127 for MIDI. So that's basically it. Let's save that patch. Let's exit. Let's turn back on PoseNet. And let's check our mapping. So if I go all the way to the left and then all the way to the right. So that scaled it, but you can see there's still, if I go past 600 or past 0 somehow, it kind of still runs around and goes to the other side of the dial. And that's because I'm using the scale object, which allows you to go past these values of 0 to 600. But if I change that to a Zedmap does pretty much the same thing, except it doesn't let you go past these values that you've stipulated here. So if I save that again, close, run PoseNet. And now if I try and go past 0, should stay there for the most part, except if I get lost and totally go off the screen. But as long as I stay on the screen, it stays there. And if I go all the way to the right, so even though that value is just a bit over 600, it's still staying all the way to the right. If I go and let the camera lose my face, then it goes a bit wild. But assuming you're staying on screen, that will kind of fix that as well. Cool.